Hey everyone, my name's Kaif, and with me I have my very good friend Surya.
Hey guys, we are starting a brand new YouTube channel, Everything Cyber, where we are excited on going about different topics, whether be it cybersecurity or some technical topics.
And on top of that, we will have tons of hands-on technical sessions where we explore new technologies, review the latest and greatest tools, and much more. The goal of this channel is to grow the thinking muscles and hands-on knowledge of both our listeners and ourselves.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on this journey, and let's jump on to this episode. Okay, we're live now. Good to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Surya. Hello, everybody. My name is Kaif. I work as a security engineer at Atlassian.
Hey guys, I'm Surya. I'm a security operations consultant at Fortune.
And I'd like to welcome you all to our brand new channel, Everything Cyber. And today is our episode number
1.
And today's topic is fractured internet. How potentially we can see moving forward a world which is very divided from a technology perspective. So Surya, what's the backdrop of today's conversation?
I think it's the whole Ukraine war. That's kind of put a spotlight on this topic. It's ended up being a situation where sanctions have been placed against Russia. So operating systems, for instance, like Windows and Mac from Apple, are not able to conduct business with Russia. So hence they have to revoke the licenses and permissions. So that has caused a bit of a scramble for Russia. So they are like, hey, how am I going to operate my day-to-day operational procedures now? Like there's no more Windows now. Then what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. So it's put a bit of question and doubt in their heads. And other countries for sure are looking at it too, like China, North Korea, and other countries for sure, having a look at it and like, now what do we do now? In case we do not have Windows or a Mac OS based operating system as a base, what do we do then? Yeah.
So adding to that, I think so far we have been treating tech as this sort of neutral object, like a resource. Imagine like the fire when it was discovered and sort of shared across humanity. So far, I think especially during the age of the internet or the web 1.0 and the 2.0 as we call it, even the 3.0 has been shared quite generously among all civilization. To some extent, there has been restrictions, but in most cases, we have been quite open to sharing our new latest and greatest innovation and wanting to reach that market that was untapped before. This for most countries, this Ukraine conflict has been a wake-up call that hey, tech is not it's not a fully neutral being. Behind tech, there is people who are highly opinionated. So, if you're in that unfortunate circumstances where you're using some resources from a country which you don't see eye to eye from, so you might be in a very tight spot, and that's what we have been seeing from Russia, right?
Yep, absolutely agree. And just moving ahead with like why now? I would say it's like two parts. So from a historical standpoint, operating systems, we've always had just Windows, Mac-based operating systems, which have continuously kept updating. Then we also had the open source movement with Unix, and then like further up with Linux, and we have different Linux distros now. So that's been the development from an operating standpoint for the large scale. And then why countries now is probably, I would say, it's been a period of growth these countries have had in terms of developing their own technical capabilities internally. So they have technical skills now to develop these operating systems to a good state. And they have resources for it, you could say. Further, I think also like with the government's focus, there's a lot of funding coming in. So the funding plus resources is a very good combination, and
Absolutely.
And with the
Absolutely.
Russia-Ukraine war as a backdrop and sanctions as a backdrop, it doesn't make a more better
Yeah,
time
yeah. And that's what we
for
have
having
been
it.
seeing. Like with China, we have been seeing announcement recently of their Open Kylin initiative. So Kylin is their national operating system, and recently 10 companies have pledged to dedicate a significant amount of time in the improvements and innovation of that Open Kylin, the Kylin operating system, which I would guess that given China's history of being a leader in the tech space, we would definitely see a lot of growth sprout from them. Um, and I would actually also say that these nationalistic operating systems will actually go beyond boundaries as well. So what we might see in the future is, with the improvement of these kind of technologies, is blocks.
Yep.
Blo where I see something like the Western Bloc, where the concurrent technology we have, they like the Europe and the America and the Five Eye countries, they will probably band together. Whereas in Asia, China has a lot of influence, so I definitely see that the Kylin operating system potentially going beyond China, and there might be more following. Similarly, for Russia, the former USSR countries, they might be more inclined to follow Russia on whatever the new software stack they choose to build.
Yep, I think you make a good point. Like I had a brief look with about Kali OS, like the languages that they offer. It's not just simplified Chinese slash Mandarin.
Hmm.
They also offer like English, Arabic, and a few other languages. So it's like pre-built within the operating systems that
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
the
So
capability
they're
to
already
expand it.
preparing
Yeah,
to,
exactly. So it's
yeah, they
not,
have that intentions.
yeah, like language is probably to showcase that they have accessibility to these regions. Like, hey, if you speak this language, my operating system is compatible. We do provide support for these languages, and
Mm.
that gives them an avenue to then expand, you could say.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. That's so. Let's assume that moving on, we do see. Let's do some thought experiment. Let's assume that we are in a timeline where these countries have implemented those operating systems. It's widely adopted, and we are seeing those division and the fracture in the way we operate and interact with each other.
Yep.
So, what are the disadvantages and advantages, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think I would start with disadvantages, as some of them are pretty straightforward. You could say. I think the first one is probably the amount of vulnerabilities that are found in operating systems, because when you have a particular focus, like if you're just focused on Windows and Mac, it's just two operating systems, right? Or if you're focused on Windows, Mac, and some Linux distros, it's just a small group, you could say. So it's
Hmm.
it's very focused, and you're able to find a lot of vulnerabilities from these operating systems, report them. And so what would happen is that when it gets more segmented, the security researchers, for example, China, I always commonly see Baidu security, Tencent security, and some independent researchers from China show up on like Mac and Windows operating
Yeah,
systems for
and
their
they
vulnerability
produce
disclosures.
amazing research
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So if China is making Kylin OS and they're like, hey, we need resources dedicated towards
Yeah,
this,
dedicating it
yeah,
to their shifting focus.
yeah, pretty much. So it breaks it apart, and these researchers will now start focusing more of their effort towards Kylin OS, and that then leaves the other operating systems, you could say, a bit more vulnerable. But
Less eyes, less eyeballs,
yeah, exactly.
like scrounging for threats.
Yeah, but it also makes Kylin OS vulnerable too, if you think about it, because there's not. It's at the current moment, it's like a world focused, you could say. Like everyone is looking towards improving these operating systems, finding vulnerabilities and researching in them. But then it'll become split focused, so it affects not just the Windows slash Western based operating systems, but also affects the blocks of operating systems that are
Mm.
going to happen. I think that's the easiest one to say. I think the
Yeah,
second.
so So your point was the reduction of collaboration. That's definitely gonna reduce the pace of innovation, right?
Yep.
And I certainly agree with that. That's the more people we have in a collaborated effort, the less the I mean the less likely a software will be vulnerable or yeah. So I 100% agree on that. But following that vulnerability line of argument, I suppose intentional vulnerabilities is another
Yep.
thing I'm worried about
Yep.
because knowing the backgrounds of some of these countries that are creating this, and if you look at what's the incentive of governments for creating this infrastructure is not just protection from foreign intrusion or rug pulls where people just take away leave with technology, but also extort some amount of control over the operating system they have produced, right?
Yep.
So I would be assuming there are chances of more like backdoors
Yep.
and more access from the government.
I think you make a clear point. What are the goals of these countries? I'm pretty sure it's not just going to be protection and also availability of other operating systems, but it for sure have some amount of surveillance, some amount of backdoors, because these countries always want certain level of access to users' data. So having a point of
Yeah, they love
entry,
the data.
yeah,
Everyone loves
yeah,
the data.
everyone loves the data. So having a point of entry to gain access to users' data is like, you could say, a part and parcel of the operating system. But that then, it becomes a ball game. So what if a security researcher then finds a backdoor, which is a vulnerability in the operating system?
Mm.
How does the disclosure work? Like the whole information disclosure in the current state, it is pretty straightforward. Like companies have, maybe through bug crowd or their own internal vulnerability disclosure programs, have a way that you can disclose it without being liable, right? But I'm not sure how it would work when countries start controlling these operating systems. I remember you had some points earlier in regards to China closing their own GitHub.
Yeah. There is so China has their own implementation of GitHub
Mm-hmm.
called Git.
Yep.
I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. It's spelled GITEE. So it's their own spin of GitHub where people can upload code. It has that whole open source feel. But the issue here is there is definitely more control from the government, which can disrupt the ecosystem. For example, not a long time ago, I have a news article from here where Git actually suspended some operations or some functionalities of the website. So and these are crucial opera functionalities like pull requests and some commits of public repositories because China wanted to do some investigation on a particular technology or something like that. And that like because on government's whim or because of some nationalistic reason, open developer ecosystem was grinded halt. And if we have people who are contributing to those Chinese nationals, they complaining themselves that these kind of disruption from the government is definitely very discouraging from their end, and they if they don't feel like they own their work, obviously there is going to be less output in those kind of ecosystems. So I would be very wary of these new tech stack that are being rolled out, funded by governments. Um, we are It's a double-edged sword, right?
Yep.
Because governments can definitely extort their control and sort of bend it to their will.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was a good coverage on the disadvantage side of things. Now, moving over our focus towards advantages, do you have any points that you think are advantages towards the situation?
Um, the first thing is the obvious one, right? So we would have why these individual operating systems or segmentation of network is created is to not only protect from these third-party tech that can be pulled, but also less foreign intrusion. For example, the reason all of these countries have their own or their own very proprietary, let's say, uh, military resources or infrastructure is because of that. It's through obfuscation, there is some protection as well. I
Yep.
mean, I'm not a big fan of security through obfuscation, but I certainly believe that when these national level operating systems are rolled out, there would be a focus on resilience, both from a cybersecurity, both from a performance side of things. So I certainly see some amount of improvement in that. And this
Yep.
is actually a very interesting case study we were actually talking about before, that when a piece of technology is isolated, historically, it is actually less gone after
Yep.
by rogue hackers or national level hackers. And I have a very interesting example to give, which was the Roblox hack that happened, I think, sometime last year or early this year, where a lot of internal documents got leaked by that hacker. And one of those internal documents, there was a very big controversial thing, but as well as I found it quite amusing. There was a presentation by Roblox themselves where they were planning their expansion to China,
Mm-hmm.
and around I think 2018 or 19, they did actually expand, and for I think 5 6 months, then they closed down, and they were I think looking to expand again.
All right.
And in that presentation, there were statements by Roblox officials on something like. Um, as we plan to expand on China, we expect more people to hack our platforms, both by individual script kiddies as well as national level hackers who are going to try to reverse engineer our platform, our technology, and try to gain advantage. And again, this is not my saying. This is more on those leaked documents. And there was even a term that I think, as part of the law, that if any Western country or any foreign country wants to expand in China, then they need to partner up with someone. And
Yep.
I think Roblox was partnering up with Tencent, and they even said Tencent themselves can try to hack them, and so they need to adjust their efforts accordingly.
Yep. I think
So
you could say it's like a certain level of threat modeling they have done,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
exactly, exactly.
to analyze the amount of risk that they can accept and how they're going to deal with it. Um, yeah, that's not a bad point. I think another advantage, if I had to think about, is competition. So
Hmm.
since there are more operating systems available, there's going to be more competition. People are going to be fighting over features and developments.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think a really good part where you could see this not being the case, where there's a duopoly at the moment, is like the mobile-based operating systems, where it's literally either iOS or Android. So it's a duopoly. So you see like Android always releasing the fancy features, but Apple or is like, hey, it's not that great. I can release this all together at a later stage, like much more flushed out. You know, so that leads to less competition and users getting those features at a later
Mm,
date. But if there are like more players in the market, there surely will be an increased
yeah,
competition. There'll be surely an
absolutely.
increased focus on releasing new features and attractive features that could gain users. So that I would think would be a really good advantage coming in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. What else? I'm just
I
trying to rack my brain.
I have an interesting one. One thing I noticed is that most of these government/country based operating systems are based on Linux. So they are some skinned version of Linux, which is
Hmm.
slightly modified. I know India has the BOS operating system, which is a Debian based operating system that's been slightly modified. So if they're using like a Linux based distro, they surely will start contributing more towards the open source community, start providing more funding and resources towards, you could say, it can
Eh,
go both ways. It can go both
yeah,
ways.
like
you
I am
know,
definitely more cynical when it comes to governments.
yeah.
Yeah, but I do agree with you that apart from the competition and the contribution, I think if uh, countries now are realizing that cyber assets or any kind of assets or tech assets is an resource to the country itself, right?
Yeah.
And it needs to be funded, it needs to be protected, improved like any other functionality or any other uh, like resource they have. So that from that perspective, I definitely see more policies, more positive action, and even funding from the government side in improving the technology that the government uses, right?
Yeah,
Because it is a danger to completely leave it to third party companies, vendors to take
other
care of,
countries
like,
too, you
yeah,
could say.
yeah, like independently now we rely on companies like Microsoft, Google, Apple to ensure the technologies side of things, right? Whether it's resilience, whether it's cybersecurity. Going forward, I think if countries are backing certain operating systems, they would definitely be more incentivized
Yeah,
to share some of the resources in improving these, especially the open source ones, like
yeah,
you mentioned. So some improvements definitely
yeah.
they're gonna.
Surely they'll if they want some features that require kernel level modifications, they surely need to firstly have it in the distro before they can even skin it on top. Uh, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it makes there's a certain level of contribution and hesitation, you could say.
Yeah,
It can go, it
it's a
can be
double-edged
either
sword.
yeah,
We'll
pretty
we'll
much.
we'll see where the knife falls on the watermelon and how
Yeah,
it
I
goes.
remember. I remember there was a news about some university researchers basically adding malicious code, like vulnerable code, to a Linux distro, and then they're like,
Yeah, and they
"Hey,
got banned.
yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
remember
Hey,
this one
hey." So,
a long time ago.
so the moderators do have the option to ban, but it just showcases that they are vulnerable. It's not like
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
code that gets through these open source projects are completely clean, completely secure. It's not
And in this
possible.
case, the moderators were, let's say, quote unquote neutral,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it might not be the case. Open source project might be backed by, someone with a malicious intention, and it's not
Yeah.
abnormal. We've seen the whole dependency confusion
Yep.
saga
Yep.
because of that, right?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, we discussed the disadvantages and advantages of a world that exists like that.
Yep.
And I love the fact that because both of us are from very security backgrounds, the all the disadvantages and advantages were very security focused as well.
Yeah.
Moving on, like, but I would like to know your thoughts on uh, realistically what's gonna happen. What are your predictions?
Um, that's a pretty tough question, if I'm being honest. I would say governments, as you saw, like since they're putting investment and they also have the resources available, they're slowly starting to move towards building their own operating systems and starting to flush it. It will surely take some time, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
they'll never catch up to Windows and Mac or some Linux distros, but it'll surely take some time if they put some certain level of effort and they can leap ahead. So they surely can catch up to like Windows. No, I would not say Windows. I would say like Linux distros, probably like in 5 to 10 years time to a decent state. But then
Mm-hmm.
again, there are like tons of factors that can affect this. It's
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
It's not like a. It's not like okay, you have money, you have resources, everything will go to plan. That's never
yeah,
the
yeah.
case,
I
right?
mean, they're gonna make an effort, and
Yeah,
we'll need to see where
yeah.
it
I,
goes.
I would say like you could have like stuff shifting. Like for example, Macs, right? They completely moved their uh, from x86 slash Intel based architecture towards ARM based architecture. That's a whole shift at a low level code.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if such shift happens in the future where the industry moves completely from an x86 architecture to an ARM based architecture slash RISC
Takes
based,
time to
yeah,
adopt.
RISC
Yeah.
based architecture, then it would take a lot of time for them to, like suddenly shift all their resources that has been focusing and developing in one way to completely another way. So all of that is dependent. There's also certain dependencies that could come from a hardware level, like as I was saying, like like if countries are like, hey, I'll also block it on hardware level, then what? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
true, true, true.
it's gonna be interesting. I think yeah, that's
Cool.
my main point I would have. Do you have any other points that you'd like to add?
Yep, I agree with those things timeline wise. It's not something that's gonna happen with a flick of a switch. Even if you are dedicating resources, it's gonna take time.
Yeah.
I myself on looking forward, I have two sort of takes. The
Okay.
first one is more on adoption side.
Mm-hmm.
I feel we will see a spectrum of adoption. So without commenting on the timeline, which you mentioned 5 to 10 years, assuming that is the case, I reckon we will see a spectrum of adoption from on the far, let's say on one end we have governments who are completely invested on domestically grown tech
Yep.
and or whatever the national operating system or tech stack is,
Mm-hmm.
and the private companies they will fall on a very wide range based on their relationships with the government.
Yep.
So some certain companies, because of government policies and regulations, there will be more usage using those, and certain companies like private companies, overseas multinational companies, there will be less. Um, and also adoption side of things, I also foresee that there will be government sanctions on mandatory adoptions for
Yep.
certain industries, like whether it's healthcare, whether it's critical infrastructure like your power, your gas, all those things, as well as things like maybe financials. There might be sanctions to which force these companies to migrate from, let's say, more open source or the traditional tech stack operating systems to a more homegrown ones,
Yep.
because that's what the government has closely controlled, monitor. That's what it trusts more. So that's one thing I have. The second thing I have is, again, the cynical side of me is I think people, in their attempt to reinvent the wheel, some of the wheel, they are gonna reproduce some of the same vulnerabilities Windows and Linux and Mac had, man. And there will be a lot of owning,
Yeah.
hell lot of owning of each other of these new technologies, especially once we have government having all of their fancy ass resources behind these operating systems, right? So it'll be juicy. Yeah, I'm curious to see whether you know hacking into another country's national operating system or something, is that an act of war? Is that the new declaration or something
I
like
think
that?
everything is under cyber warfare at the moment. You could say to a certain
True,
level,
true.
but like I really like the point where you said that governments can enforce. I think that's a key point because private companies they're always like trying to sell you stuff. You know,
Yeah.
governments are like, I just have the hammer, I just put it down, and now you're in.
Mm,
You have to follow this. You know, it's kind of like compliance. You have to comply by set
mm.
standards or set
Yeah, yeah.
rules. Otherwise, we're not going to partner with you. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and
they
and
have so the
security has been for a long period of time a compliance requirement. It's
yeah.
it's only in the last 4 to 5 years I see that shift where people are really care about it, right? So there you go,
Exactly.
the power of compliance.
Yeah. So if you have to comply, then yeah, you're stuck with it. So it doesn't matter if you're a private company, a public company, it doesn't matter if you're a
Mm,
hospital, a school, or a trading business, you're stuck. You're stuck because you have to meet the requirements. Otherwise, you will not be able to do business. You'll not be able to partner with the government or work with the government for a contract, you know. So these restrictions will force companies to shift, as you said.
cool, cool, cool. Alrighty, I think that is a wrap. Surya, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
absolutely loved that conversation. I learned so much from you, and hopefully I could add some things as well. And thank you so much to all of our listeners or viewers who
Thank you,
have been
guys.
listening our this first episode on a variety of platforms. Hope you had fun, and we will be having lots of these kind of conversations as well as hands-on tech stuff in our future episodes. So please stay tuned, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
See you soon, guys. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
guys.
We really appreciate you listening to us and hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to also like and share our videos, and see you guys in the next episode.